Hello and welcome everybody to our broadcast today. This one is going to be a good one. I am really excited about it. Although everyone is a good one. Thank you guys for joining us today. I really appreciate the support. And, just to say a word about Parenting Accurately before I invite my guest on the show right now. I've been really overwhelmed and blessed and thankful for the response that we've been getting. Just this week, our posts have reached over 38,000 people. And I want to thank you for sharing Parenting Accurate with your friends, with family, with those that you feel could benefit and be blessed by this broadcast. Parenting Accurately, if you're new here, maybe you're joining us for the first time, Parenting Accurately is a place where we're encouraging you to really dive deeper in your connection with your kids, to parent accurately. I really believe that our kids need us, especially in the teenage season of their life. That's usually a time where most kids are distracted, they have a lot going on, they're going through changes, and they still need parents. They still need their parents just as much as little kids. So I'm very excited to welcome our guest. We were talking just before we started this about the show and about the things that we're going to talk about and discuss today, about parenting your child's gift. You're in for something very special. So if I were you, I would close any other browser that you have open. If you're driving, really pay attention. Wherever you are, whether you're watching live or the replay, this is going to be an awesome time. So I want to welcome Cindy Hatcher. She is here with us live. This is not pre-recorded. This is not rehearsed. This is raw and live. So Thank you, Cindy, for joining me. And if you could take a moment, share with everybody who you are, what you're up to, and then we'll dive in.
Sure. Thank you so much, Jason. I appreciate you having me. I have been a licensed professional counselor and licensed marriage and family therapist for over 20 years. Have worked in a variety of different settings, inpatient, psychiatric, outpatient, and have been, like I said, in private practice for a while now. I also run Revive Leadership International, which is a coaching and consulting group, and love to be able to do training and teaching. I also serve very directly in our church, our local church body here as a minister, and just love to be able to do what I can to see marriages, families, and leaders really thrive. So that's part of my calling there. So I love doing this and being able to help people understand who God made them to be and how to ultimately improve their relationships, because I think that's key to life is our people.
Yeah, that's awesome. I remember as I was growing up, I fortunately have come to know God when I was young. And with that, I began to learn what God planted inside of me, or what the direction, the gifts that He gave me, and the desires that He gave me, and to be able to understand those desires. I feel fortunate to have discovered those early, but for many, maybe they'll discover what they were created for later in life. And I cannot imagine what it would be like to just go about floating around in the world without a drive, without living in your purpose and living in your destiny. We were talking earlier, God gave children their gifts even before they were born.
Right.
And so as a parent, we have a job. I'd like you to speak on, the gift in our kids. It's one thing for us to have the gift. We have gifts. We do. But children have gifts from God, early on. And would you say that as parents, we have a responsibility to help our children discover their gifts?
Absolutely. I think as parents, our primary role is to be stewards of them In fact, I often tell the parents in my office that it's our job to work ourselves out of that job. We are just stewarding them. And so it's an honor and a privilege for them to be ours for the time and the season that they are. But ultimately, they are the Lord's, and we are stewards of them. So I do believe that it is our responsibility as parents to help them to grow and to develop, becoming the best version of them that they can be. And we are actually role models and signposts to God himself. So I think it's vitally important that we invest in knowing how to do that and becoming a better parent and being able to help our kids every way that we can.
Yeah, sounds like a big responsibility.
It is. It's a life.
It's a life.
And here's the thing. You're not just stewarding that one life. You're stewarding the generations that come after that life too. So this is part of your legacy as a parent. And so God loves family. He wants family. He is family. So it's important to him. Relationship is top on his list too.
Yeah, excellent. Well, I would like you to take some time and share with us the things that you have to help us learn and discover, learn to know how to discover our children's gift. Sometimes that might be tricky. And depending, every child's different. So I know with my own, even, I feel like I'm getting ground with one, and then I realize, okay, now my other daughter, she's a completely different human. She's wired differently. I have to discipline her differently. Her motivation, what motivates her, is different.
Absolutely.
Her love language is different. So I'm constantly in this mode of learning and trying to understand how to be a parent, really, to each one, as they're so different.
Absolutely. I mean, that's every relationship that we have, but especially as parents, because as we said, God's given them to us so that we can enjoy them and to steward them and give them back to him ultimately as we launch them out of our homes. I like to talk about the gifts a little bit here in the beginning to describe the different kinds of gifts so that we don't get confused by the category of gifts, because oftentimes when we say that word gift, we also think maybe talent, and I want to bring some clarity with that right away. So the first thing is when you look all the way through scripture, there are 3 specific gift categories that are presented in the word when you look up a gifting or a spiritual gift, when you look up that word. And in 1 Corinthians 12 through 14, it talks about the gifts of Holy Spirit. There are 9 gifts that are listed. I'm sure there are more than that, but there are 9 that are listed as manifestation gifts. This is how Holy Spirit shows up through all of us, how he manifests himself. So I'm not talking about those gifts. I'm not talking about faith or miracles or healing or prophecy. I'm not talking about those gifts. Those are absolutely probably gifts in your children as well that we want to understand and pursue and to grow. They are very important. I'm not talking about the gifts of Jesus that are mentioned in Ephesians. That is the 5-fold office gifting. These are the people that were given to the body of Christ to help grow us and develop us. They are those who are going to be leaders in whatever their gift is. So, for example, I use Billy Graham. We know he was a pastor and a preacher, but his office gifting was as an evangelist. He could preach one sermon and thousands would come to the Lord, but he was to steward that gifting, not only to be a single man on a stage, but to teach other people how to become evangelists. They're to equip the saints for the work of ministry. That means every saint is supposed to have all 5 of those on some level. We're all to be evangelistic. We're all to be prophetic or teaching or pastoring in some capacity. So I'm not talking about those gifts, although those are good as well. I'm talking about the Romans 12 gifts. If you read that entire chapter, Paul is talking about how we're all different parts of the body. The eye can't say to the foot, I don't need you. We all need to work together. We're not the same. We're going to be different. And where this teaching came from is a study of the 7s in Scripture, because there's a list of 7. And there's a pattern that you see, and I won't be able to unpack all of that today, but I wanted to walk you through what those 7 gifts are and how they show up. Similar when we talk about personality, I like to use the word wiring a lot, but this is your motivational gift. This is why you do what you do, the way you do it. And so many people are very familiar with personality tests and the DISC and the Enneagram and things like that. I've studied all of them in psychology and love them all. I think they're all great, but none of them point you back to God and to the Word. So that's really why I love this particular teaching. And I like to introduce it just by telling a bit of a story. So let's say all 7 of these gifts are sitting at the table, and a child is at the table and happens to accidentally knock their glass over and spill milk on the table. The first instinctual response from somebody will help you identify what their gift mix is. Now, remember that their particular level of their gifting can be immature or mature, can be unredeemed or redeemed. We're all in process. Okay, so I like to call those the number line scale. So we are in negative numbers or positive numbers, and so what we want to do is have a more mature response, but that's not always what shows up instantly. Okay, so when I give you this example, it's a strong stereotype, is why I said all of that. So let's say a child spills milk. And the very first response from the prophet or perceiver motivational design gift is going to be, well, that's what happens when you're not careful. Now, that can come across sounding really harsh and judgmental, but what it is an observation, a perception, and a quick explanation or judgment as to why it happened. It's very black or white. That's what happens when you're not careful. It's a principle. And prophet or perceiver, you can interchange those labels. They are wired to be able to determine black or white, right or wrong, good or bad. They're very quick to discern that. They perceive those things. And so that would be their first response, not trying to be mean, but can sometimes come across sounding a little harsh or judgmental because they're quick and to the point. And they kind of tell it like it is, you know. So then the next person would probably be the servant, because the servant is immediately going to take care of the task. They usually don't say anything. They like to stand behind the scenes, but they want to meet a practical need. So the first response of a servant is, well, let's just clean that up. Let's grab a towel and do what we need to do to just take care of the task. And so that's their initial motivation, is to provide in a practical way. Okay, and to take care of people in that way, and don't necessarily need any communication or credit. The teacher is wired in such a way where they want to explain, again, the why, similar to the prophet or the perceiver, but they like to break things down into detail, and they like to go really slow, and they love history and tradition and education. So that's why the label teacher. So the teacher would say, well, let's go ahead and clean that up. Now, the reason why it spilled is because you filled the glass up and you put it over here at the edge of the table. And so when your elbow hit over it, then it knocked over. And then, so they're explaining in detail why it spilled. So the next time you move your glass, you know, put it over here so it's not at the end. And then they might move into like talking about inertia and force and mass, because they have a wealth of wisdom that they love to impart. And that's their motivation, is to come up with some kind of odd fact that not a lot of other people are going to know, but they want to share that information. Then the next gift is the exhorter. The exhorter is the high personality that loves relationships, that loves connection. They're like the party waiting to happen kind of person. They walk in joy very easily. They've never met a stranger. So the first thing they're going to want to do is connect to the child and make sure the child feels okay, bring some comfort. While they're cleaning up the mess, they're going to use a distraction method to get us back to joy. Let's return to fun. You know, life's not good unless it's fun for the exhorter. So, and they're quick at taking care of it. So they'll say, oh, don't cry over spilled milk, while they're cleaning it up. Hey, have I already told the joke about the cow that did da 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 da? And so then they're shifting the atmosphere back to fun, but they're being social and connecting. And that's usually their first, some level of response. The giver would be the next gift, and that is a person who actually is a little bit harder to peg compared to all the other gifts, because they actually show up similar to all the gifts. They kind of have a little bit of everybody. So if you're ever one of those, that anytime you've ever taken a gift test of any kind, sometimes it's really hard to peg you because you actually have a whole lot of them. But the giver by nature is very independent, is very resourceful. They do not like to talk about history. It's present, future oriented. They're very family centric, small circle, family centric, but they do think generationally. But they also operate from kind of a business person's point of view. They'll just say, well, let's go ahead and clean this up and let's make sure we don't do it again. It'll be really direct. It'll be really to the point, not as harsh as the prophet. It'll still be practical, but they just want to move on. Let's get to dinner, and so let's just take care of it, make sure it doesn't happen again. Whatever they invest in, they want to make sure they get a good rate of return. And so the giver is able to analyze some of that and then bring in resources. So let's go ahead and grab another glass of milk and let's have an extra towel hill handy just in case we have another spill, kind of a thing. And then we have the ruler. The ruler is kind of what I call the project manager person. They are naturally gifted in leadership, and they're high task oriented. And so they're going to be the person that says delegation. Okay, so Susie, grab a towel. Robbie, pour another glass of milk. Joe, let's go ahead and get this so that we can get back to dinner. So they like to delegate tasks and assignments and get us back to the project of family mealtime. And that's the ruler. The last gift is the best of all, as I like to say, simply because they carry the Father's heart. They are the mercy gift. They are the heart of God, compassionate, tenderhearted, and they're going to be all about the child. They're going to be taking care of the milk and cleaning it up, but their main focus is, are you okay? And so they'll talk to the child, it's okay, don't worry about spilling that, and then they'll empathize. I've spilt my milk too before. I know exactly how that feels. And they will engage in that way. Even if they do some of the other things that some of the other gifts do, their primary method of motivation is compassion and connection and making people feel better. So as you can see, your initial response tends to be your actual instinct or your motivational design gift. And so if you're one of those 7, or if your child is one of those 7, as you develop an understanding of each of these gifts, then you can actually parent toward that gift in some way. So does that make any sense so far? Do you have any questions or?
Yeah. No, it's great. It's interesting as you were explaining this. I've recognized, like, in all of my children, like the different gifts that they have and the way that they respond to things. So what I'm hearing is that it's actually not that difficult to discover the gift that your kid has. Really, you just have to observe them and see the way that they respond to situations. And then that is a real good indication of what motivates them, what their gifting is.
Yeah, and I think if you ask most parents, they kind of already know this instinctually if they know their child. It's just as kids get older, they adapt and they learn things and they go through hormonal changes and all of those things. And so you can see them, like I talk about that number line scale, either in the positive or the negatives. You'll see them ebb and flow in some of that, but their core nature is in there. What you have to focus on as the parent is the nurture part and how to be able to parent toward that so that we grow and mature that gifting. We don't want somebody to just have that motivation. It's not like, I tell people, when you learn this, you don't just get a label and go, okay, that's what I am. That's what happens in a lot of personality tests. This is not a personality test. It's beyond that. It's the essence of who you are. It's instinctual. So yes, we have to come up with behavioral characteristics or traits so that you kind of know what category you're in. But beyond that, there is so much more to this teaching that I really can't get into today. But there is a way to intentionally parent toward that design. So let me give you an example. I've got some notes here for me. If I look away, just so you know, my key things that I would highlight, if you think your child is a prophet or perceiver wired child, you want to be able to understand that principle means everything to them. And they will struggle with always needing to be right. It's right or it's wrong. It's black or it's white. They will come across very strong and opinionated. They will need lots of validation in their identity. Even though they come across very strong and powerful and bold, they actually have a really soft heart, just as soft as the mercy is. And they are the hardest on themselves. So even though they may not let you on, their internal dialogue is super negative against themselves. And so they can be the harshest critic to somebody else and be right quick to tell it like it is, but that's how much, like 10 times harder they are on themselves. So you want to really be able to help them with that. They also are not really naturally great at relationship skills because they're so principally wired. They're not as personally wired. So they have to learn how to do softness. They can't be blunt and direct all the time. They need to be able to know how to not just rely on themselves, but to learn how to live in family and relationship and do give and take, and learn actually that you don't have to be right all the time. Would you rather be right or have relationship? Well, instinctually, they're going to say, I'd rather be right, but no, relationship is more important. So they have to learn that. That is not a natural thing for them to have mercy and compassion. The first thing is for them to be opinionated. For the servant is usually the sweet, obedient child. They're almost too easy to parent. You don't usually have to redirect them. In fact, what you would do in terms of parenting them is trying to get them to grow courage. They like to be behind the scenes. They want to be supportive. They don't want to be out front. And that can really frustrate high achieving kind of parents because they want them to be bolder or speaking up for themselves more often, or to try to be a quote leader, to look more like the prophet or the ruler or something that society would say is a leader, but they're a servant leader. They can still lead. They're just going to do it differently. And we want to be able to respect that. But we have to also teach them personal responsibility. Sometimes a servant can struggle with that. They don't always know how to set boundaries with people. They will try to please, but not just from an emotional point of view, but a practical point of view. And they can just be task-oriented only. And then, honestly, so quiet sometimes that they sometimes get so, there's introvert and extroverted in all of these gifts, but they can be so neglected at times that they actually put themselves in that situation in relationships. So we want to cultivate that. We want to cultivate their ability to serve. Where I've seen that show up with some people is if you can get your kid to do volunteer work somewhere, they'll start to shine. They'll get really excited because they want to feel productive and actually supporting other people. They were made to create platforms for other people. They don't mind being number two. They're great at it, but we want to teach them their authority, that they can still be confident, even if they're not necessarily comfortable being the one in front. The teacher, what's wonderful about teacher kids is they're usually very easy to parent as well in terms of being very mild-mannered. They're the even-keeled kind of kids, similar to the servant in that way, but they're deep thinkers. They will sometimes ride on some parents' nerves because they ask the 1,000 questions because they're so studious. After a while, they're just going to want to go get in a book. They're going to study stuff themselves, or once they learn something, they're going to want to come and be like, hey, did you know this about this? Like, I know a kid who's a teacher and he loves dinosaurs and all the details of dinosaurs, and like, he loves to be able to tell everybody what he knows about the dinosaurs. So sometimes the teacher can come across a little bit of a know-it-all. So we have to kind of help them with not doing that and not having pride. They can sometimes be super witty and humorous. That can come across a little sarcastic. So we want to help them with empathy and being able to connect with other people. Sometimes they can isolate themselves as well because they are such deep thinkers. Then there's the exhorter. The exhorter is sometimes I'm going to say this. It's often. Mm-hmm. It is often the exhorter child that gets in the most trouble when they're young, especially because they're the adventure kid. They're the kid that's going to change the world. I mean, they're the ones who love everybody, will talk to a stranger in the grocery store, and it is scary as nobody's business because they don't need you to be around them all the time. They just want to be with the next person, but they need people, and they need to work out their energy. They need to be on display. So sometimes they'll get told they're too much, they're too loud, they're too annoying or whatever, and so they end up getting a lot of rejection. when they're younger. And so we have to be able to teach them how to manage that pain and to embrace it and heal it. To be able to process it out verbally is something they're usually really good at. They're usually great communicators, and that's why we want to develop connection with them. But we do have to teach them how to manage their energy and stuff as well. I kind of call it the dimmer switch. We got to learn how to have a dimmer switch and to know your inside voice and your outside voice, we say to children usually. But we need to be able to help them with that. They are going to really struggle with completing tasks. They will naturally appear ADD, and they may not necessarily be ADD or ADHD. Honestly, the hyperactive part is how they'll show up. But they're not necessarily that way. They may be highly emotionally expressive, and that may be really uncomfortable to quieter, more introverted parents. So this is why I love this teaching, is because you not only need to discover what your wiring is, but the wiring of your kid, and to know how to work in that field of grace to be able to help parent them well. And then the last three. So there's the giver. The giver on one hand is going to want to be very generous and just give their stuff away. If they see a need, they're very practical, like the servant can be. They're a resourcer, so they want to resource people. If you're missing something, they're going to try to give that to you, or try to make connections in that way. They can be really independent, and so they might isolate a little bit, but they kind of like being independent and doing whatever they want to. They're the kid that has like a little bit of all of the ones that I'm going to share with you, so they're a little harder to peg, but they'll ebb and flow out of different ones of these. Where they tend to struggle is, I'm going to use the word manipulation. Sometimes these are some super bright kids, and they will manipulate in order to avoid conflict. It's a little bit hard. See, it's even harder for me to kind of explain in this little brief moment about how to really talk about that. But they need to learn to not be so self-centered also at times. So they can almost not even know how to have fun, because they just want to do their own thing and don't care what everybody else is doing. The ruler, we need to give them something to be in charge of. The ruler has got to boss some people around, or to be in charge of something. They need some things to do. They need tasks or projects to accomplish, and they need somebody to applaud them when they're done. These are empire builders, the rulers. We do have to teach them how to honor other people's boundaries. And to not always boss everybody around. I always tell bossy kids, hey, I love your energy. You're going to be a great leader one day, but we need to know how to work on our relationship skills there.
I think I just want to pause for one moment.
Yeah.
I think that what you just said is super important. A lot of times as parents, we want to make corrections in behavior. And I think that it would be very, very easy as we do that to stifle that gift.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like you just said, I appreciate your energy, but there's a right way to focus that energy, and there's a wrong way to do that. And making that distinction and helping them, let them know that, hey, this is, your desire is okay. There's nothing wrong with you, but there's a way to do it.
Exactly.
That's huge.
It is very huge. And when you can understand the gift mix, then you can also understand there are going to be times. I have a very high energy exhorter son, and he's 12, and he always wants somebody around all the time. And he's always been that way. He's the guy that brings the joy. He wants family time. He wants something to do. And we have to help him with his dimmer switch, but we also can't keep talking about calm down, be quiet, calm down, or whatever. We need to give some space for him to just run and be free and be loud, so we highlight when it's okay to do that and when it's not okay to do that, because they do need help with stewarding that. We would often joke that, he's the kid that will wake up at 7 a.m. on a Saturday because there's no school, because he's so excited that he's got so much daylight on Saturday to play and to be with his friends and do things. But he is a monster to try to get up to go to school, because school's boring. It's not as fun, except that he's got friends there. So you kind of have to talk, don't forget you're going to see your friends today, But he's going to be motivated to be like, well, what are we going to do that's fun? He's always looking for that. So Yes, he has to learn how to manage his energy, but we also need to give him permission to have that energy at times as well. So this is an ebb and flow. You have to have the grace to know when and to learn how to steward your children. And the mercy is the last, again, but not the least, is the tender-hearted kid, the sweet one that's really compassionate for other people. They literally will give their shirt off their back to somebody who needs it. And so we have to help the mercies to be able to manage their emotions. We have to give them permission to have their feelings and to cry. And not only the mercy, all kids, I believe. We don't do that enough sometimes as parents, but mercies will struggle. I mean, the biggest thing the mercy is going to have an issue with is home organization. Like their room is going to be the messiest room. Like if you have a slob kid, it will be somewhere between the mercy or the teacher will be the top two probably, and the exhorter would be the next one in terms of lack of order in their room as a kid. If their emotions are, being expressed, if they're having a hard time or if they're frustrated or overwhelmed, sometimes it's just what they do. So mercies, we want to be able to make sure that we provide adequate nurture, that we go slow with them. Mercies have a really hard time when it comes to change. They need lots of time to emotionally process a change that's going on. When you want them to turn it a dime, if you're wired that way, they're going to need more time. You're going to need to let them process that a little bit longer, and it can be harder because they're sometimes the whinier kid. They're the ones who will have a hard time accepting personal responsibility sometimes. Will be the first one to blame somebody else or take on kind of a victim mentality. And so you see how this isn't easy to only describe the behavioral traits because it's such a strong stereotype that you can have a really healthy kid that knows how to do all these things a lot better, and not just because they're older, but because you've trained them and given them permission. And so to parent them toward their gift is to help identify what God put in them, and to identify, remember this whole teaching brings you back to God also. What aspect of God himself is in your kid, especially if that's an aspect that you have a struggle with. Sometimes that in of itself can actually prick something going on inside of you. For some people, as an example, if they're very mercy wired parent, will sometimes enable their children, and they have a hard time setting boundaries with their own kids. So that's, as a parent, knowing your gifting, it's important, especially if you have an opposite wired kid, like one who's a ruler or a prophet, and they're strongly opinionated and bossy, you're going to get into a power struggle there, right. And so that's why this teaching, I think, is so powerful, because then when you go from not only the nurture and the behavioral traits, but then you start thinking about, but God is merciful. How would a father parent? How does he parent that? And if I have a hard time with someone who's bossy and opinionated, God can be bossy and opinionated too. So what do we struggle with? Maybe some black and white principles that God lays down when it comes to justice, if we're mercy wired. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So sometimes there's an aspect of God even that we can recognize, there's an aspect of God that I need to, learn more about and grow in my own relationship with God in that manner. I hope that makes sense. But that's why teaching is so powerful.
Yes, it is. And so needed. I have one daughter that is very, very passionate about justice.
Yes.
Like she has to have justice no matter what. Even if it's to her own, hurt.
Yeah.
She loves justice.
Mm-hmm. My first guess would be when I hear that, I usually hear the prophet. Yeah. Perceiver is usually strong when it comes to right and wrong, justice. However, remember that all of the gifts can pursue justice. It's the way that they'll do it. So a mercy-wired person would say that's not right because they hurt for the animals, and they want to join the SPCA at 8 years old, and become a vegan at 10 years old because it's not right that people are killing chickens to eat. Do you know what I mean? Like mm-hmm. Their mercy gift can bring them into a place of justice. So although my first thought, like I said, stereotypically, I might lean toward the prophet. It really depends on why. It's the way that they manifest that. It's their reasoning behind it, their motivation for why they are. So that's what I'm looking for. It's the way they do something. Everybody can be mean. Everybody can be judgmental.
Right.
It's just the prophet can't help it.
And that's where it's important that the parent is able to discern, okay, is this a character issue or a behavioral problem?
Yes.
Or is this a gift of God that's, just needs to be honed and nurtured?
To be matured and redeemed a little bit.
Right, for sure.
Exactly.
So I think that
yeah.
as a parent, the earlier you can pay attention to these different types of behaviors and responses to discern like the gift that they have, the better. Because then you can start early and start molding that and preparing that and shaping that. And number one, I think validating that.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. When you're able to take the intentional opportunity to dive into a teaching like this, or any kind of parenting, I just want to validate that parents who do that, those who are watching, those who are listening, it's because you love your kid. And the thing that the enemy wants to do most is beat us up about that and not being a good enough parent and not doing it right. And how am I going to figure all this out? And so I just really want to release kind of peace to parents who are struggling in that way, to know that God gave you these children because he believes in you and your ability to steward them. But it is important that we're intentional in investing in learning. We will always make mistakes. Listen, I'm a therapist and I make mistakes in parenting. I have a 12-year-old and a 15-year-old going on 21, she thinks. and we have to develop our arsenal, if you will, on how to grow in connecting. I work with families on the regular basis in my office that when they invest, they can absolutely change the course of everyone in their family. I'm thinking of a family right now whose father and older teenage daughter were in high conflict, and to the point that the dad had to leave, like he left the home for a couple of days because he was really struggling with all the conflict that was in the house and the fighting that was going on in the marriage because of it. And then the kids were fighting. It was just a lot of conflict in the home. But because they decided to come in, now I will tell you, they brought in the teenager first, because that's what happens. They're like, well, can you just fix the kid? Help with the teenager. I think of things systemically. So of course I brought in each person, in the family and especially the parents, because as parents, mom and dad, you have the greatest influence on setting the atmosphere in your home. I always tell people as parents, you want to be a thermostat, not a thermometer. You don't want to take the temperature. You want to set the temperature. And if you can teach your kids to do the same thing, you steward the atmosphere in your house, and connecting heart to heart is the primary thing. And so we had to work through some particular communication issues and things like that. But as I helped them discover their wiring, it was like light bulbs went off. And now they can actually laugh and joke about it a little bit because now they understand each other. And then when we added talking about love languages and how we all experience love differently, and we talked about boundaries and honor, and you begin to develop concepts in your home of, okay, let's talk as a family. I tell people to have family meetings where we sit down and have these kinds of conversations without me. This is stuff that you need to do at home. Have a sacred time once a week where you just try to connect heart to heart. It doesn't have to be boring or, where all the kids are rolling their eyes, waiting for the quote meeting to be over. No, this is important heart to heart work. It's how you build emotional communication in the home. And then you can have family game night or playtime and stuff too. But any parent that is willing to invest in doing more you're going to see fruit. You're going to see the fruit of your efforts. So don't give up hope. Try to make sure you take care of your own hearts. Don't let the enemy beat you up and put you down as a parent, but to have hope. And hope to me is a confident expectation of good things. That's biblical hope, in my opinion. Definitely. So yeah.
Our kids are good soil. Any chance that we have to sow seed into them, to plant life into them, to encourage them, it's an opportunity that we must take advantage of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's,
Thank you
it's
for coming
important.
on. There's so much to talk about with this in this subject. Thank you for what you've shared. There's a lot to digest, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Maybe you're there thinking about, wow, I should have taken notes. Well, go back and watch the replay. Take some notes. And Cindy, I know that you've offered to come back on again with us, and
Yeah.
we really appreciate that. But before we share the date and the time that we're going to do that, I'd like you to take a moment and share with everybody how they can get in touch with you if you've resonated with what she's shared and you want to go deeper with her. I know that you're working on some things that sounds very good.
Yes, I'm actually putting together for the first time online this teaching. I've taught this course many times in church and in different groups, face to face, but I'm actually developing a beta course right now that's going to be launching in February. And so what I've decided to do is start just a small group. I'm only going to take a handful of people, maybe 20 people or so, through the beta course just to kind of test out everything, because online and technology is a little different than face to face. But I want to be able to walk some parents and people through this teaching of the Motivated by Design course. It's actually going to be an 8-week course. It's really a group coaching course that I will be going in once a week, doing the training, helping do some coaching calls to walk you through your wiring, your spouses, your kids, so that you see the impact of the relationships that can change by the end of 8 weeks by discovering your gift mix, discovering all the different things that come through that, because this affects your work life. It affects every relationship in all honesty. And so if you're interested in that, this course will eventually be sold for $1,000, but I'm giving a half off discount. So it'd be $497 for anyone who's interested in signing up for that. All you need to do is send me an email at info@reviveleadership.com. And we will then connect you with how to get signed up with all of that. We don't have everything worked out yet because we're not launching it until February, but we are in the preliminary stages. And so I did want to open that up to your people, that if they're interested in investing in that 8-week program, that we are starting to take names and spots. And so, like I said, I'm hoping to only have a small group of people to be able to do that, maybe 20 or so. So if they're interested, info@reviveleadership.com is the email. Just let me know that you're interested in signing up for the Motivated by Design course. Other than that, you can go to my website at cindyhatcher.com, where there's lots of information about the different services I provide. And if you join my email newsletter, then you'll also get some of that information through your inbox as well.
Awesome. We'll make sure that we drop the link after the broadcast. That way people are going to refer back to that. Again, thank you. So we've decided that Tuesday we're going to come back on together and continue this discussion. That's 12 o'clock on Tuesday Pacific time. We'll create an event and let everybody know more about that. But in the next meeting or the next broadcast that we're going to do together, there's going to be a little bit of teaching, and then we're going to take some time and open it up to questions. So we will answer some questions live. So make sure you send us an email or put it in the comments, maybe your questions, and we'll get to as many as we can. It's going to be a great time. So thank you for agreeing to do that. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
So in closing, how would you describe parenting accurately?
Well, based on this paradigm, I would say parenting accurately is parenting a child in their design gift, their motivational design. The scripture that says, train up a child in the way that they should go. I always say it's not teach them the Bible only. It is train up a child in the way that they should go, the way that God wired them to go. And if you'll learn how to steward them well, then I think you're parenting more accurately.
That is awesome. With that, we'll end this broadcast. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and we look forward to next time.